The sun provided no warmth. It was nothing but a sickly orb in the ashen sky spreading above Marcus's head, casting long shadows over the ruins of what had once been a well-developed, thriving city. Now, it was nothing but fallen rubble. Marcus moved silently through the debris by his feet, his machete gripped tightly in one hand, while his trusted backpack slung over his shoulder on the other end. He was exhausted beyond repair. The air was heavy and thick, with the stench of decay, which was a constant reminder of the world he now lived in. The world which had taken away his happy life, his home, his everything, and thrown him in the middle of the undead, every day a battle of brutal survival. He had been on the move for weeks, scavenging for food, water, and shelter. The zombies were everywhere, their deafeningly guttural groans echoing through the empty streets. But until now, Marcus had been a survivor. He had taught himself to move quickly, strike decisively, and never ever look back. He hadn't looked back when his mother had been taken away by the zombies, and when his younger brother had disappeared from right before his eyes. He knew he couldn't stop to look back over every tragedy around him, or else he would be gone just as quickly, just as mercilessly. He needed to keep running and fighting. But today, something felt different. He breathed deeply into the decay, rounding the corner of a collapsed office building, when his gaze landed on a heavily rusted metal door, which remained half buried in the rubble. Right above the door, in bold red color, which was now barely legible, were the words, "Facility 7, authorized personnel only." Marcus hesitated momentarily, unsure of what to do. As the city around him had grown in the past few years, these facilities had grown in number, with the additional amount of scientific experiments and technological advancements which were going on all around them. No one had batted an eye, because everyone had been certain that the places were just occupied by genius scientists who were working on yet another formula to make the world a better place to live in. These were the very people who had found a cure to cancer, had developed flying cars, had found ancient dinosaur DNA to treat all kinds of skin diseases and whatnot. They were the ones who had taken the world into the future, and everyone was baffled by the rapid advancements around them. But now, all of it was gone. From experience in these past few months, as the zombie apocalypse had unfolded around them, Marcus already knew that these bunkers were whether a death trap or a gold mine. He could find almost anything and everything down there, and he would be stepping inside blindly. For all he knew, it could already be occupied by the undead, or perhaps filled with a supply of advanced weapons, which would make his survival easier. He stood there, wondering what his next step should be, when the sun began to disappear from above him, nightfall approaching. The groans of the undead from behind him grew louder, and it almost felt like he didn't have a choice. He had no strength to keep running and needed shelter for the night, even if such a shelter was a huge risk. Marcus shook his head, taking bold yet noiseless steps towards the metal door. He tried to pull the door open with his bare hands, but the rust had settled deeply into the hinges, making it almost impossible. He fetched a flashlight from his backpack and held it carefully in his other hand, while trying to pry the door open with his machete. After applying immense force, the door finally gave way, and Marcus stood there in the dark open doorway, trying to listen inside. It sounded entirely empty, completely devoid of groans or deep sighing. He flashed his light inside, finding the place deserted, and quickly slipped inside, sealing the door shut behind him. He could not risk the undead venturing here to find him. He sighed in relief, looking around his new hiding place, which was thrown into complete darkness, save the only light which was flickering from a fluorescent bulb hanging on the ceiling towards one end. The air was stale, tinged with the metallic scent of rust and something else, something chemical. A wave of nostalgia hit him as he remembered his chemistry lab back at high school, which usually smelled exactly like this after an experiment. But what could this mean? Marcus wondered. He turned on his flashlight and swept the beam across the room, noticing how the walls were lined with shelves filled with dusty cans of food, various medical supplies, and ammunition. His eyes brightened at the discovery, realizing that he had done the right thing by coming inside. He could collect a lot of things from here to last him for the next few days, and he definitely needed the ammunition. He continued looking around, still careful and on guard. He knew that he needed to always be alert in times like these, the undead all around them. As he walked further, he noticed that a table in the center of the room was cluttered with maps, some kind of blueprints, handwritten notes, a traveling laptop, and several files. Everything was scattered as if the lab had been left in quite a hurry, not giving people the time to gather everything they might need. Right across from the table was a heavy steel door at the far end of the room, emblazoned with a biohazard symbol. A faded sign above the door read, "Warning, restricted access, containment zone." Despite the clear warning signs, he cautiously approached the door, his flashlight revealing a keypad by the side of it. Despite the awful conditions of the world around them, the door still appeared pristine, signifying its strong and very effective build. Marcus knew he might never be able to pry it open, and from the looks of it, the keypad still seemed to be functional. But where was he going to find the PIN code? He continued to stare at him, wondering if he should even try, despite his instincts screaming at him not to. He knew he should turn back rather than risking his life, but curiosity got the better of him. Trying to find out more, he rummaged through the notes on the table, finding a pamphlet with the picture of the once well-established facility center from the outside, and a list of doctors on the front page with their pictures. The largest image was of Dr. Evelyn Carter, who appeared to be a middle-aged, attractive blonde, smiling straight at Marcus from the paper. He looked at her curiously, turning the page where he saw 4 numbers scribbled down hastily. He rushed back to the keypad and realized the tiny screen had 4 blanks, which meant that this could be the PIN for this containment zone. But he was still not sure about opening it. What if he found something terrible inside? Backing away from the door in confusion, his left foot landed on a piece of paper, and he quickly picked it up, shining his flashlight on the page. Fear gripped him as he began to read, his gaze falling first on the sign below, which displayed Dr. Evelyn Carter boldly, her handwriting clearly a typical doctorly scrawl. Marcus continued reading from the beginning. "I am writing this because I know death is coming for me." The outbreak began a few months ago, the virus spreading faster than we could have ever been anticipated. Facility 7 was immediately sealed, but I always knew it was going to reach us sooner or later. No one is inside the lab instead of me, Doctor. Tyson, Dr. Lara, and Dr. Kane and I can see the fear in their eyes. I cannot imagine the fear on the faces of the people out there, facing this tragedy every single day. The test subjects in the lab are beginning to show signs of mutation, and I can see the virus is rewriting their DNA. They are slowly turning into something inhuman, and we are losing control. Laura tried to kill them all the other day, but that did not go as planned either. We asked the military for help, but they have abandoned us, leaving us on own. The virus should have never happened. It was never meant to be a weapon, but it was meant for the betterment of humanity. And yet, something went terribly wrong. I wish I could turn back time. I wish I could erase it all. I would. But if there is still someone who can make things better, it is Dr. Bristol. If he is still alive, and Facility 19 in the other side of the country is still safe, only he can help us. Goodbye. His heart raced as he read and then reread the letter, realizing he had been right. This was not just a bunker, but a lab instead, and something absolutely terrifying had once been kept behind that steel door, which was now before him. From what he could understand, the zombies had not just broken out of nowhere, but had been the result of a virus gone wrong. But what were these test subjects? Could Dr. Evelyn and her team have been experimenting on zombies to find a cure, and even that had gone wrong? Marcus was stunned, unsure of how to take this all. He shook his head, turning his attention back towards the keypad before him. With trembling hands, he typed in the combination written on the pamphlet, the click of the lock opening, causing goosebumps all over his skin. His whole body shivered as he finally pushed the door open, the soft hissing sound alerting him even further. A nauseating mix of rot and chemicals immediately hit his nostrils, even before he had fully stepped inside. Carefully walking into the darkness, which could very well be his death, he shined his flashlight, revealing rows of glass containment cells, most of them shattered. He immediately knew that these must be the very cells where the doctors of this laboratory had kept the subjects for their experimentation. The entire floor was littered with broken glass and dried blood, making Marcus wonder who the blood belonged to. He could see it all unfold before his very eyes, how the mutated zombies, which had turned into something even more sinister, must have broken through these containment cells to kill or perhaps infect the doctors. Chills ran down his spine at the very thought. He was just about to turn around when he saw it. Marcus's breath caught up sharply in his throat as he looked ahead to the far end of the room, where a figure stood motionless, its back to Marcus. Marcus wondered if the figure had noticed his presence, or if he still had the time to turn around and escape before the figure even turned. His clothes were 2 sizes too small, almost entirely torn apart, and from what Marcus could see, his skin had turned a poisonous green color. Marcus took 1 step back, inching slowly towards the door, but he was gravely mistaken. The figure turned, his harrowing appearance enough to make Marcus wild with terror. What was he going to do? The man, or thing, whatever it was, had a humanoid appearance to it, but was majorly twisted, its green skin pale, mottled, and wrinkly. The limbs were artificially elongated, making the creature look even scarier. Marcus froze, his grip tightening on his machete while he kept his eyes open, afraid to even blink. He had fought way too many undead to know that anticipating their next move was entirely impossible, and this creature before him was something even worse than the zombies Marcus was familiar with. He had been mutated to become even stronger. Before Marcus could do anything else, the creature's eyes finally opened, glowing red into the darkness. Marcus could see he was looking at him, a sinister smile on its shapeless lips. Marcus stood frozen in terror as that thing let out a guttural roar, charging towards Marcus at a speed which was terrifyingly swift. Marcus turned sideways as the creature crashed into the metal door, which was just behind Marcus, sealing it close once again. Oh shit. Marcus knew he was trapped. He could not get out of there until he somehow managed to kill this thing. Despite the terrifying thing he was facing, a part of him felt confident to defeat it. He had been in this game for far too long now, and he was not going to give up without a fair fight. He was young, strong, and his machete had helped him kill more zombies than he could potentially even believe imagine, or count. Without wasting a single second, the creature turned and lunged towards him once again, his movements rather agile for someone with deformed and elongated limbs. Marcus could already see that he was definitely far different from the undead out there, his chemical makeup making him far stronger. The undead were neither this fast nor this agile, but this creature right here possessed every single one of the qualities which was giving him an edge over Marcus. Marcus ducked quickly, the creature's long claws slashing through the air where his head been only moments ago. That was close. Marcus got up and swung his machete, the blade biting into the creature's arm. It howled in pain, but did not stop, its movements growing rather unpredictable and wildly erratic. The cut on his arm seemed to not even matter anymore, as he made his way towards Marcus once again, raising his arms hastily to somehow plunge his claws into Marcus's skin. The fight was beginning to turn into a blur of adrenaline-filled motion, making Marcus feel sick and fuzzy. The smell of the chemicals he was being forced to inhale were giving him a headache, but at least he was not injured yet. As the creature tried to hurt him once again, Marcus dodged and struck, his machete brilliantly cutting through flesh and bone. Despite that, the creature was relentless, its strength far beyond than what Marcus could have ever imagined. It was definitely nothing like the undead Marcus was used to fighting. As the creature jumped towards him once again, Marcus jumped too with a desperate cry, knowing this was going to be a make-or-break moment. He plunged his machete into the creature's skull with one final ear-piercing shriek before collapsing straight to the ground, twitching and then falling still in the midst of the broken glass and blood, which was spread onto the floor underneath them. Marcus stood there in shock, unable to believe he had just managed that. He staggered back, his breathing heavy, while he looked at the creature laying lifeless on the ground. Despite the stress, Marcus's mind kept racing, constantly wondering about what could this creature be. It was definitely so much more than just a zombie, something absolutely worse. And it had been created here, in this lab. Marcus was stunned at the whole thing, unsure of what to do next. The glass containments in the lab told him that at least 20 such creatures had been kept here, and they had all escaped, which meant that they were out in the world, and they might be multiplying right now, creating a much stronger army than just the undead. He needed to do something. But what could he do? No one out there was strong enough to defeat a whole army of these impossibly strong mutated zombies. Finally catching his breath, he ran out of the heavy metal door and closed it shut behind him. He did not know what else the creature was capable of and what was going to happen to its body now that it was dead, and he definitely did not want to find out either. He fired up the laptop splayed haphazardly on the table before him, the screen coming to life before his eyes. The display was cracked, but somehow still functional. Marcus approached it cautiously, his fingers hovering over the keyboard as he tried to make sense of the files displayed before him. He opened the first document, his eyes widening as he read the contents on the page. It was a clear makeup of the initial virus that had created the zombies, bringing all of his suspicions to life. The virus was not just an accident. It had been engineered, tested, and released intentionally, but it had definitely been administered to make a superhuman breed of species, but it had instead attacked the brain and turned them into the undead. Oh God. He explored further, reading the next documents which contained pictures of the undead in the containment chambers, where the doctors in Facility 7 must have tried to find a cure. Every single step of the experiment was labeled, up until the creatures had begun to look like the creature he had just fought and killed. All of this had been done by humans, inside the very lab he was standing in right now. Marcus wanted to punch the wall in anger, realizing how the very technological advancements and scientific discoveries they had supported were the reason behind the end of their world. Everything had been done by humans, and he could no longer do anything about it. Unless he found someone who could look for a cure. He had to try to find Dr. Bristol. That was their only chance to save the world. He quickly gathered everything that looked important, along with the laptop, and carefully placed it inside his backpack. He then took the cans of food, medical supplies, and ammunition to keep with him, because he would need all the supplies he could get in this journey. He had to travel too far to find Dr. Bristol, and he didn't even know if the man was still alive. The journey was going to be long and perilous, but Marcus had to try. A loud banging on the door of the bunker pushed him out of his thoughts, reminding him that the world out there was still filled with zombies, and he had to be ready. Their guttural groans were enough to tell him that it was time to escape before they tore apart the door and entered inside. Marcus shut his backpack, kept his torch in his jacket, and held the machete in his palm, like the lethal weapon it had proved to be for so long. He needed to get out of here, and he needed to do it fast. The world was definitely broken, but it was still not broken beyond repair, and Marcus was determined to fix it as much as he could. He stayed in the shadows, waiting for the undead to walk inside the darkness, and only a few seconds later they tore open the door and jumped inside one after the other. With the skill and practice of a seasoned fighter, Marcus swung his machete, hearing flesh being torn apart, and ran outside as quickly as possible. He shut the door after him and ran into the darkness, knowing that he had survived. The bunker faded in the darkness behind him as he kept running, with only one motive in mind. He was going to reverse this experiment. He was going to find a way to make things better. He couldn't die without a fight.